Oh, it's a goal. Who got the assist? Who got the assist?
Greetings, everybody. So, as FPL gallops back into view following what's been an eventful international break in terms of transfer deadline days, consequential injuries, and our first managerial departure of the season, many FPL managers have pressed buttons as events seemingly have come to a head. But have we? Well, let's see. Back from his holidays following Nick's guest appearance last weekend, Sam's here and I assume raring to go again. How are you, mate? Did you have a good holiday?
Yeah, refreshed, recharged. Really enjoyable time in Morocco, actually. Got there in time for deadline just about. So I was making my final decisions on the plane and hoping that by the time I landed, there was good enough Wi-Fi to get the moves done. Luckily, there was, although it was a little bit ropey in the airport. The airport Wi-Fi wasn't quite as good as I wanted it to be. But I got the moves in and yeah, Morocco was great. Watched the football in a sports bar and just had a great time. So refreshed, recharged. Looking forward to some more FPL action after a nice couple of weeks off. But of course, we are Who Got the Assist. On today's pod, we'll reflect quickly on game week 3 and how we did, if we can even remember that far back. Obviously, we've had deadline day. So we're going to take a look at some of the players that may be of most interest from those last minute transfer moves and the way the shifting plates has maybe changed our thinking going into game week 4 there. Game week 3 injuries and some managerial changes, as Tom hinted at. We'll be obviously talking about those and what that might mean for our FPL sides. And as we've titled it, perhaps a perfect storm for some managers needing to use their free hit or possibly even wildcard going into game week 4. Form and fixtures or form versus fixtures will be coming back as always. 1 week punts and best captains as well. And obviously finally finishing off with our teams, which might be a bit more interesting than usual with buttons potentially getting pressed and some decisions left to be made. It is Wednesday, the 10th of September, a day late due to some scheduling. And before I hand back over to you, Tom, I really enjoyed last week's pod as well with Nick, I might add. It was great rolling back the years and listening to Nick on WGTA once more. So yeah, great fun listening to that on a sun lounger in Morocco. And hopefully all of you out there enjoyed it as well.
Nice one. Thanks, mate. Yeah, no, it was good. It was good to get away from the rough and tumble of normal FPL, but get back into it we must, and get back into it with those game week 3 scores. What happened an awfully long time ago. A very swift update, a very swift one from me because, well, I mean, as trailed, for those who remember, the days of yore, i.e. about 3 weeks ago, I went for Cunha, brought him in, captained him. I sold full Krug as well for Mark Gu. I'm thinking I could save myself 0.2. I ended up with 0.1 because Mark Gu fell as well and went back to Chelsea too. So that's good. So that means the next transfer I make in game week 5 is going to have to be a Chelsea player out. So we shall see what happens there. But yeah, basically the whole week just went belly up because of the Cunha injury after 30 minutes. You can't legislate for that. Obviously, I was really annoyed at the time, but now it's been quite a few weeks, a couple of weeks later, I'm fine with it. It is what it is. These things happen in FPL. Last minute Bruno penalty. I mean, that can happen at any time. It's just when it happens at the end of the game, you know, you start when you begin to kind of think, oh, I might have gotten away with it a little bit here. And that's when it starts to, that's when it kind of hurts a little bit. But hey ho, it is what it is. So 46 points I got in the end. Toes in got a clean sheet and got DEFCONs. Pedro Porro got retrospective DEFCONs. Dewsbury Hall a goal and assist. So the 5.0 magic bean coming through for me really there, and came on for Cole Palmer, who I kept. So I sold Wirtz in the end and kind of got away with that one, which is quite good. And then João Pedro obviously with 9 points. But yeah, Cunha getting injured basically was what the whole thing hinged on, and the reason I got a red arrow by I think about 1 point or 2 points according to the safety. But yeah, can't legislate for it. Very, very annoying, and it is what it is. But yeah, you had a much better week though, and you seem to be charging back up to some semblance of relevance away from me and 5.4 million.
Yeah, also very unlucky on Cunha, I must say. Any other game week that would have ended up on the other side of variance, on the other side of a bit of luck. So yeah, rough start to the season for a lot of managers out there. But I might add, there are managers who are absolutely incredible, who are even like lower ranked than 5.4 at the moment. So do not worry whatsoever. If you're down in those ranks alongside Tom right now, it's not panic stations necessarily, I don't think. But yeah, so I got on the right side of a bit of luck in game week 3. So I had Fernandez from game week 1 for the sole purpose really of captaining him in game week 3. So I went ahead with that strategy. Obviously, as Tom mentioned, get the last minute penalty. There's always a slice of good fortune in that, but you do buy these players for the 90 minutes and the penalty factor. So it's nice that it came in clutch, and a little bit of payback from last week as well, where he missed his penalty and I felt very hard done by there. So it all balances out in the end, I guess. Elsewhere, Sarr, who I brought in alongside João Pedro. So both of my transfers in scored, which was lovely. So I sold Mark Giu and Palmer in the end. I noticed an opportunity seeing that Strand Larsen was doubtful, very doubtful to play, and we got rumours that he wasn't even with the team the night before. So I decided to act on that and use the money from downgrading Palmer to upgrade my third striker, Giu, to João Pedro. And obviously that's gotten very lucky because Giu is no longer a Sunderland player, and that would have been a little bit problematic moving forward, so got away with that one. Sarr obviously went off injured. He looks unlikely to play game week 4, possibly even game week 5, so a tad annoying, I suppose, but he scored, so I'm not exactly too frustrated with that. And I also getting a 7-pointer alongside 2 DEFCON returns from Tarkowski and Porro. Sanchez with a clean sheet, which again was a little bit fortunate from that Josh King goal that never was. Overall, I would have loved to roll transfers going into game week 4 because I wanted to have 2 or 3 to attack Liverpool and Crystal Palace going into game week 4. But there was an opportunity and I took it. And 64 points for me, big green arrow up to 2.4 million. But ranks are so tight at the moment. I think it's 18 points between us, Tom, that's 3 million in rank. So it's like 6 points per million at the moment on average for those middle ranks. So there's just nothing in it. It means nothing at the moment.
No, definitely not. So we continue onwards, and yeah, quite a packed pod today, as Sam mentioned. The first thing, obviously, is to talk about deadline day, which happened after we logged off for the international break. Quite a lot to discuss here. Obviously, the headline: 3.19 billion spent in the transfer window, a 1.36 billion net spend for the Premier League. We really are enjoying our lives, aren't we, here in England? One of the few things that we can be happy about and raise flags all over my high street about. I'm assuming that's what people are raising flags about. Anyway, and we're almost definitely not going to discuss every single transfer which happened. There's a couple more which maybe I'll just touch on. But yeah, I think the key one really, and we'll talk about him in form versus fixtures as well to some extent, is the headline for 10.4 million, Alexander Isak going to Liverpool finally. That long and eventually quite tedious saga, concluding with Isak getting his move. And I don't know. I think that one's probably the key. Obviously, is the key one. And I think that the main sort of ramification of that is that in FPL, it may be that we suddenly got a viable alternative to Salah. Maybe the prime Mane sort of situation like that. There was at least 1 year, maybe 2 in there where Mane was actually, you could captain him and be quite confident that he was going to match or better Salah for a little while. Yeah, and I think Isak may well become that sort of palatable Liverpool representative over the long terms. In the short term, had Gakpo, you had Ekitike, you captained them over Salah, you probably evens, if not slightly better, so far this year. But I think over time, Isak, once he's in the team, and gets those expected minutes, which I don't think that's not going to take very long for it to happen. I think that he's going to be have a huge impact on us as FPL managers, and maybe also free up some money as FPL managers as well if Isak becomes, some player that we're going to afford over Salah. What's that? 4 million that we've got extra to play with. I think that Burnley game may be a bit too soon though, Sam. And I also think that Ekatike's minutes are probably going to be most impacted by him. I don't know whether Gakpo is quite in the same boat, maybe slightly. But I think he might be the one, Gakpo, who ends up being one that could be an interesting one to hold on to in that midfield at the kind of the relatively cheap price that he got, obviously, after being reassigned to midfield. So yeah, really interested in that one. I think it's one that I'm going to keep an eye on over the longer term. But what did you think of it? It must have been quite an exciting move for FPL in your eyes too.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, it's just good to have more forward options in the game again. At the start of the season, Wissa and Isak both kind of on the sidelines, not really troubling our FPL teams. It does narrow the field a little bit, so it's quite nice to open it up again. It's a new price point as well at 10.4 million that no one's really got that price point covered in, well, anywhere, because Palmer's injured, Saka's injured, Isak has been a non-factor. So there's a big drop off between the two premiums and then the 9 million options. So it's quite nice, and it will create a few different shapes and structures to our team over the medium term. And it will give managers a decision to make whether or not Salah is worth the money, whether or not Isak's worth 10.4 now he's not on penalties and maybe he gets reduced minutes with all of that competition. And then again, there's knock-on effects to Ekatike, possibly Gakpo, possibly Wirtz as well, through knock-on effects down the line and other players coming back in. I think it's a really exciting move, and Liverpool have got themselves a hell of a striker. Whether or not that's going to translate into essential FPL pick, I think is yet to be seen. But it's exciting nonetheless. And it will be a factor at some point this season, probably sooner rather than later.
Yeah. I think that's incredibly exciting. I really do, for the reasons that you stated, and kind of having that, premium for another premium forward in place, kind of the gap between Watkins and Gyökeres and Haaland was quite appreciable. But I don't know. I think just having that sort of money spared, if Salah does become sort of somebody that we think, okay, I can kind of just about go without Salah and have Isak, suddenly I think that kind of creates a lot of flexibility, creates a lot of optionality, lots of choice, as you say, and also weakens the template a little bit too, because there's going to be lots of different ways that people are going to play with that money and deploy that money. Think about how defense is big at the back has become a lot more interesting now. I think about all the different sort of players you can come to the fore. So many possibilities. I think that's really another kind of feather in the cap of this season, which, despite the poor rank, I'm still very sort of enthusiastic about. Elsewhere, Randall Mwani to Spurs. I'm still not convinced he actually exists, Sam. I think he's just a Football Manager sort of pyramid scheme that isn't real. Decent on-field data, never seems to have found a home. 7.0 though, interesting price, once up to speed. Donnarumma, Sam, I mean, there's an elite star, isn't there? I mean, fair play to City. I'm sure will be in our minds at some point. I think he came in at 5.5. A penny for James Trafford's thoughts, though. I mean, that must be pretty terrible, mustn't it?
In a World Cup year as well. The only thing I can imagine is that, obviously, since things have changed, Pep's gone to him and been like, right, look, this year's not your year, but Donnarumma isn't young. You're going to be an understudy to one of the best keepers in the world. Learn from him, and you're our future. And maybe that's the marketing pitch he's probably given him. But yeah, you've got to feel for him.
Donnarumma's 26 in goalkeeper year.
Oh my God, is he?
In goalkeeper years, that's 18 years old. And
oh my God. I'm genuinely, I cannot believe that. I thought it was like way not, like, look at him. I thought he was like 34, 35. No, he feels like he's been around for ages.
Yeah, I think he was literally like 16 when he started playing for Milan.
Oh my God. Yeah, you're right. I mean, that is crazy. Yeah, I mean, in that case, scrap what I just said. That is absolutely ridiculous. That's the dumbest thing I've said on this pod, and I've said many dumb things.
No, that's fine. I've many dumb remarks over the years.
Thanks for catching, though. Thanks for catching.
Sorry. Wissa, another one who got his move. So Newcastle fans very angry and annoyed at how Isak conducts himself, but yet very happy to receive a player who conducts himself in a similar way, which I always find very amusing. A real love of ours, Wissa, from last year and the year before. Fantastic non-pen data as well for Brentford. I think he and Walter Marde, who has joined from Stuttgart, he's coming at 7.0, could be a really interesting double act. Walter Marde, even though he is I think he's kind of almost 200 centimeters tall, i.e. about kind of like 6'4", 6'5", one of those players who's got great touch for a big man. One of those players who, you'd expect him to be one of those who's really good at heading and all that sort of stuff, but actually he's more of a technical player, like a 9-10 Voltamade. So I think it'd be really
Mm.
interesting to see him and Visser together. And yeah, Visser coming into the equation, Sam, he's one of those players I think who is never going to be far from our minds. I'm pretty sure that Newcastle are around the end of November, and they do have like a really good sort of run
They
around
do.
then. So maybe that's the time when you'd be looking at him or Voltamade.
Yeah, game week 13 is when I initially wanted to wildcard. Obviously, plans can change, but that also had Newcastle's run in mind around then, and having 7 to 7.5 million strikers in there as cheap but high upside options alongside Liverpool's good run and Man City's good run around that period of time. It's going to be really interesting. And also, having seen what we just saw in game week 3 with a 5-3-2, I suppose, for Newcastle, Eddie Howe is willing to play them both, possibly. So it's going to be really interesting to see how that shapes up. Obviously, Barnes, Gordon, Elanga, they're all going to want minutes. So I'm interested to see what shape they settle on over a longer period of time with what is now a pretty star-studded forward line and wide players as well. They've got plenty of options in there, and you'd imagine some are prioritized for the Champions League a little bit, some are prioritized for the Premier League, but they're all going to steal minutes every now and then.
Yeah, I mean that kind of the 4-3-3 shape with Joe Linton, Bruno Guimaraes, and Tonali. I mean, you'd be maybe thinking with Altamade and Isaac, and Visser that you'd be going to a 4-2-3-1, but does he sacrifice that sort of that really sort of energetic and really kind of well functioning midfield shape for something more attacking? We simply don't know. So yeah, really intriguing to see how that one sort of plays out. Aston Villa, a couple of deadline day moves. Harvey Elliott at 5.4, I think could be really interesting, and one of those players who has always kind of shone and caught the eye when he's on the pitch. Okay, underlying data, not amazing. It depends where he's deployed as well. We need to see what happens there. And Jadon Sancho at 5.9, also across the Villa. A couple of interesting moves there for them. Some kind of much needed spark maybe being introduced into that team after a very sort of anemic first 3 game weeks. Mr. Hincapi over to Arsenal. I think the main upshot of that one, Sam, is that he muddies the waters for Arsenal fullbacks, especially on the left, where Calafiori, MLS, Lewis Skelly, and him can all play. Hincapi, hugely versatile. Watched him last year in the Bundesliga for playing for Bayern Leverkusen. He popped up in all sorts of positions, honestly. Like left back, left wing, and also left-sided centre back, which is why he was signed effectively. But it's quite interesting that he and Calafiori basically can both do a very similar thing, and also got MLS in there. It's really, really confusing as to what can happen with that. And it also makes if you're wildcarding or you're free hitting this week, which we'll talk about in just a minute, that Gabriel and Mosquera probably at 5.4, probably only 2 that you can actually look at, because you just don't know who's going to be playing. Maybe Timber as well, you can make an argument for it. I think Ben White's back too, so a bit of a bit of an interesting situation there. But any of those players catch your eye?
Elliott at 5.4 could be really interesting if we see him hit the ground running. I wouldn't be bullish enough to go there just quite yet, because we just don't know exactly how they're going to shape up and whether they're going to look a bit more creative. It also may be one of those things where, okay, Elliott's a fantastic footballer, but is he going to get the FPL returns? Well, at 5.4 million, he's probably still decent value anyway, but he might have a knock-on effect on Watkins, Rodgers, and so on and so forth, and might help them become slightly better FPL assets once again. Outside of that, I don't think there's too many that I'm like immediately drawn to. I wouldn't say. It's more, okay, they're added to my watch list in a few weeks. Sancho, I'm not interested in for now, maybe down the line. I don't think there's too many that I'm like rushing to break apart my side for. But if I'm wildcarding in a few game weeks time and a few of these options look nailed and 90-minute men, then potentially, especially Elliott at 5.4, it's easy enough to get to him.
Yeah. Absolutely. A few others elsewhere. I'm not going to stop and talk about these at length. Sunderland doing a Nottingham Forest, can't stop buying. Gertruda at 4.5. Brobby, how much did he? Wow, that's a lot of money. It's daylight robbery. Way. And decent record year before last, but and the one before that, but it's Ajax, and we just don't know how that's going to translate into the Premier League. Bertrand Traore returns to the Premier League. At Fulham, a couple of interesting fun day signings. Kevin 6.0, obviously from the Ukrainian league, who knows? And Chukwueze, a proper Football Manager legend for me. I don't know if it's the same for you, Sam, but one of those sort of speed merchants who's fantastic off the bench if you were chasing a game at kind of the 70th, 80th minute. Like one of those amazing sort of players you could stick in inside forward, just just carry it, dribble it, just dribble more. Career average of 0.4-ish XGI per 90, that electric pace I mentioned. So yeah, could be an interesting one. Gu call back to Chelsea, we'll speak about in a minute.
Yeah.
And no Chelsea centre-back signing, Sam, was I've got a couple of other players to just mention quickly who were signed just before the deadline day. But no Chelsea centre-back signing, Sam, I think was kind of quite a significant one that I noted down. Tosin Stonks, I think, do rise a little bit because of that, because I think there was a point a couple of weeks ago that we were thinking, they're going to sign centre-back during the transfer window, but it doesn't appear to have happened.
Yeah, like you say, it probably cements a few of the already existing options into the Chelsea lineup a little bit, which is quite nice for you potentially. And it might also make Chalobah a better option over time. I think above average are the guys who have basically been like harping on about Chalobah's average points over the last season or two at over 5 points a game week. And if he is nailed into that lineup, even with Champions League, then that could be very interesting down the line. So yeah, I mean, Chelsea defense is looking impressive enough already. And if they felt that they didn't need another centre back, then fantastic. We've got our options a little bit more nailed in. So brilliant news.
Yeah, very happy with Tosin at 4.5 for. That's great, and I think he's probably going to stick along when I wildcard probably in game week 6. A couple of players to give a shout to. Yeremy Pino, who's called Yeremy in the game, 6.0 at Palace. He seems to be the Eze replacement. I read an Athletic article about him, and I did know him from Football Manager, and I happened to see his cameo against Villa, and it's really, really nice touches. And I kind of, from the Athletic article, 22 years old, over 100 La Liga appearances, caps for Spain, and a cup winner. This is a bit small, I've got to say, but very snappy. And when he was 19, so a couple of years ago, he got 0.5 XGI per 90 for Villarreal, starting 31 games. So got it in his locker. And the other one I want to just mention quickly, it may have been forgotten a tiny bit. One of the more telegraphed moves of the summer is Garnacho to Chelsea, 6.4.
Yeah.
And one of those could become a real FPL possibility, Sam, at the price with the profile of the player he is. Selfish, loves to strike, still raw, looking at underlying data. One of those could really be of interest if injuries bite or if he established himself, but eyes wide open to it being Chelsea. A couple of kind of potential luxury picks that we may kind of come back to later on in the season. Sort of player that is just eye-catching and may have that kind of lovely sort of toxic combination of being really good to watch as well as being a good FPL asset. Elsewhere, the other bit of big news is that Nuno is gone and Ange, he's back, mate. I mean, what do you make of this, and what do you make of the impacts for Nottingham Forest asset holders or owners of their players?
Yeah, I mean, the writing seemed like it was kind of on the wall from around the late summer, and Nuno's recent comments clearly were the nail in the coffin, really. It never looked like they were going to recover that relationship ever since. I think it was but mainly between Edu and Nuno, and they've just got differences in opinion that seem too hard to get around. So that decision was made a little bit later in the break, it seems, than some were expecting. Maybe they were just getting the paperwork sorted for Ange before making it official. That would make some sense. Obviously, he took his first training session today. Look, I think there's almost an overreaction to Ange and the possibility of a change in system straight away. I did jokingly say, like, RIP Nottingham Forest defence, and I think they will go downhill fairly significantly over time as a defence. But arguably that slide had already begun towards the back end of last season. They weren't putting up elite data anyway. And even at the start of this season, again, no clean sheets. The data wasn't looking too positive. So I don't think it's going to have a dramatic impact on how we see Forest assets in the immediate future. No. Arsenal next, so no one was buying anyway. And then you've got 2 promoted clubs after that. So I think it's kind of as it was for a couple of game weeks at least. And then by about game week 7, most of us were looking at getting rid anyway because their fixtures turned sour. So I don't think it massively impacts too much, if I'm honest. If anything, it might impact the way I view taking on Forest in terms of like the teams going up against them, because the style of play will probably change fairly quickly. I don't know about the first game week necessarily, but we do know that Ange likes aggressive front foot football with that high line. I think those principles he'll try and stick to or enforce fairly quickly. So it might be teams of a certain style and nature that can break down those or break through the high line quite quickly are the ones that will benefit the most. And it's a stylistic thing that we can look at targeting teams against them in that manner. But I don't think in terms of the players you're holding on to, Anderson's not going to lose his place anytime soon. You wouldn't think. Wood will probably keep starting. Probably Arsenal's an aside because he's come back from the other side of the world and actually arguably wasn't set to necessarily start game week 4 anyway against Arsenal. I think he missed out last season. But game week 5 and 6, you'd probably hold on to him for that anyway. The defenders fairly soon to go. Probably hold on where you could hold on. You don't have to. If you're on free hit game week 6, then you could probably look at bidding now. But yeah, I don't know about you. I don't think it massively impacts my plans that much, to be honest.
Well, someone with double Nottingham Forest defence, what I will say is I've spent a lot of time because one of my teams that I've been looking at game week 4 didn't take much time to look at, but I've been spending a lot of time hacking away at my wildcards in game week 6, and yeah, I'm not taking any Nottingham Forest with me. I think
not on a wildcard, no,
exactly. But I mean, I'm old enough to remember, Sam, when a new manager bounced was something we all look forward to in FPL rather than writing off the assets of the team. I think it's kind of because Forest are morphing from being a known quantity to an unknown quantity. That's when kind of the concern sort of drips in a little bit. And you're right that I think over the short term, we're probably going to say it's probably going to, there will be some compromises that Ange will make, I'm sure. So some defensive solidity, as you mentioned, may be compromised in order to favour the attack. And can you imagine Milenkovic playing a high line and pressing?
Yeah, I was going to say.
Him and Murillo, which one of them is going to be the Van der Ven and have the recovery pace? And yeah, it depends how adaptable Ange is as a manager. We've seen it in the Europa League; he was able to be adaptable. Maybe if he kind of uses his Europa League tactics in the short term at Forest, that might be all right. And yeah, onwards, you're fine to keep him, especially with the 5 and 6 fixtures being plum. I'm not sure if he drops immediately, but I think it probably will be that Ange will eventually favour a different profile when the dust settles. So after 5 and 6, I think that would be the time where I'd be like, if I was holding him, I'd be like, yeah, all right, see you later. But yeah, good to have Ange back, I think. Always nice to have good characters in the league. It was him or Mourinho coming, I wouldn't have minded either, to be honest. I know kind of Mourinho is more of an SHIT than Ange is, but I mean, it's still fun to have these characters and the dramatisation that football has now become. Right. Okay. Injuries. And I think this leads us into the kind of the perfect storm idea. So have injuries and transfers and transfer people made in game week 3 specifically led to a perfect storm for people to hit wildcard and free hit. So your man Saar came off crocked. And I think that we're all armchair physios nowadays, aren't we? But has a grade 2, I think it was, a hamstring strain, which I've learned from reading 3 people's Twitter feeds that they wrote lots of detail about. It means it may be kind of 3 to 4 weeks. Cunha has been pitched on an exercise bike, so probably going to be all right. And Cole Palmer, who's the other sort of significant injury, I think, unless I've missed one, Sam, has said he was soon back. And Lazy FPL spotted that in Enzo Fernandez's picture from training, and he was in the background doing his laces up, which is obviously an indicator that he is fit, raring to go, and will score a hat-trick against Brentford. Clearly, that is a foregone conclusion now. But I suppose the FPL upshot of that is that some of your players who are injured, you'd made transfers for individuals like Cunha, some people brought them in, Mark Gu going back to Chelsea. Some people are like, oh God, this is getting really, really bad now. Couple that with the fact that this particular game weeks has a few wrinkles to it, such as Liverpool playing Burnley, such as Crystal Palace at home against Sunderland, and maybe some were thinking, you know what, this could be time to wildcard because it's not gone very well. The way in which events have panned out means that plans to delay wildcards and free hits have been stepped away from, and more immediate remedial action was required. And it's worth noting, it was a poor start for a lot of the algos as well, which had seemingly begun to favour earlier free hits and wildcards than in pre-season, when it was kind of telling you to leave it till a bit later. So if you started with an algo heavy kind of setup, has this situation suddenly become one where you have a perfect storm to think, yeah, I'm pulling the pin? So, Sam, as per the podding we did in Game Week 3, has that torrid start, do you think, simply continued, and people feel like they need to satisfy that need for, action bias and acknowledge outcome bias, or have things all to come together with injuries, having to make those transfers of players who have then got injured or not performed, and all this sort of thing come together in a near perfect storm to hit that button? What do you reckon?
Yeah, it's an interesting one, because I think it is of course very situation dependent. But at the start of the start of the break after Game Week 3 wrapped up, I was quite tempted to press either of those two buttons. I think I text you saying the Moroccan heat's getting to me, because I'm tempted to activate wildcards. I've maybe gone away from wildcarding now. Looking at my team, I don't think it's quite there for a wildcard, although I do have concerns. Strand, Larson and Sarr in my side, and only one free transfer to deal with. So I think a big temptation for me, and probably for a lot of other managers out there, was the fact that a lot of us were hoping to have a couple of transfers rolled by now. And then the Palmer injury obviously set quite a lot of people back, the Saka injury as well. And then a couple of transfers have been used by a lot of managers already. And then on top, Game Week 3 didn't really go to plan for a lot of people either. Now, that's from a points perspective, but also from a team structure and shape perspective. A lot of people don't have a route to get to Erling Haaland, but feel like the meta structure is favouring Haaland over Salah already. And then you've got the injuries and all of that added on as well. And it is making people feel quite twitchy. I would say that I'm much more tempted to free hit than wildcards at current time of recording. Like I said, I played around with the wildcard. I can understand completely why some people are really tempted. And if you've got a high level of confidence on what you feel this season is going to look like from a structure point of view, and who the key players are going to be, then wildcarding now looks like, on paper, a very strong time to do so. Get on Arsenal, move across to Haaland fairly quickly soon after this week, and you can rip apart all of the injuries in your squad. However, I'm not personally fully confident on how this season is going to shape up just yet, who the big players are going to be, who the key teams are going to be to target. And I just need a little bit more information before I've got that level of confidence to press such a definitive button, I suppose. Whereas with free hit, it is much more tempting for me this week, because there's some great teams to be targeting this specific game week, and a couple of injuries that probably won't last too long. And also, just a couple of fixtures I wanted to move away from, ideally with 3 free transfers this week, that I'm just unable to do so now. So, yeah, I would still be tempted to wildcard in certain situations, but for me, I do feel like I need a bit more confidence in how this season's going to shape up first.
Yep, I feel you. So I've hit the free hit button, and the reason for that is very kind of circumstantial. So Nick and I spoke about this on the pod last week, or the week after the week before last. I think it is this Sunday, wasn't it? And the template is quite weak currently, which means that you probably can benefit right now in the way that you couldn't before. So in my particular team anyway, I had Cunha, I was still holding Palmer, one Liverpool, no Palace, and there's a clear, as I said earlier on, set of games to target that create the spine of the team in of itself. So Palace versus Sunderland, Liverpool versus Burnley. I also had double Forest defence versus Arsenal, which I didn't really want, especially with the Ange news, which came afterwards. But hey ho, so it made sense for me to probably free hit. And I think that reflecting what you were saying about wildcard, Sam, I thought there were a few things with wildcarding I didn't quite like compared to free hitting. So free hitting kind of is very sort of rent those players for now to attack what looks like quite a good week, depending on kind of recovery from internationals. It's always can be a bit fuzzy, but I think we can probably set up a quite a good team. We'll look at mine later on in the show. But I felt like with the wild card, and absolutely, as you said, if you're happy wildcarding now and have a sense of conviction, go for it. And I've seen a lot of really, really good wildcards. I thought there were good things like the fixture swings needing to build in transfers. So necessity of booking in 2 transfers in 6, assuming you want Salah now and Haaland in 6. And also kind of being a bit unsure about the edge pieces and things like that. I did look at a draft on kind of thinking, right, I'm going to pull one of these on Saturday night. I thought that was kind of last week, the week before last. And I thought I'm going to pull one of them. I just didn't like the wildcard draft, but I liked the free hit that I kind of put together. And I just wasn't convinced enough, basically. But as Nick and I spoke about on the pod last time, Sam, there's definitely a potential argument to say that you can benefit from holding course if you started all right, or if you believe in your team and think you've just gotten a bit unlucky. So it can swing and it can cut however you'd like it to. I think the universalism of us all being on the same team has kind of been chipped away at a little bit this year, just due to the plethora of options which are on the table in front of you. So I say it's very substantial, it's very kind of, it's not substantial. It's very sort of dependent on the team that you've got in front of you. People like me may free hit, people like you may free hit. Other people may have been maybe doing fine. You may just kind of like your team, or you're confident in the solve, which takes you to triple captain Haaland in game week 6, for example, and you can figure out a plan to get from 4 to 6 and get Haaland in for 6 easy enough. And there's lots of different ways you can go about it. There was one question I actually got asked by a friend of the pod, Tom Campbell, who asked, if you did wildcards, could you go without Haaland or Salah? Haaland and Salah actually in it. Is that even a thing right now? I mean, I looked at FPL General's team, for example. He got very unlucky this week, by the way. He's kind of this year decided he's not going to own either of them. And you can just get a crazy team and have so much money in the bank. But I don't know. I'm too chicken, Sam, effectively, to go without one of them. And I think, my wildcard 6, I've not looked at having a team without Haaland. If I was wildcarding this week, there'd be no way in hell that I go without Salah just because I'm too scared.
I don't think it's that viable today to go without either, but only because of the options on the table. So Isak's probably not going to get great minutes right now. Palmer's potentially still out for another game week, or at least a doubt going into game week 4 at time of recording, and Saka's out for a little while yet as well. So the sort of the A- premiums, the tier down that you would otherwise captain if you went without those main options that are the second most reliable batch in the game, are all kind of not options right now. So then you move down another rung on the ladder and you go towards Watkins, Gyökeres, Bruno, which all of them can be good captains at times, but you've got just that little bit less confidence, I think, in most of them. Maybe bar Bruno now, where people are starting to come around to him and his routes to points a little bit. But I think maybe by game week 6 or game week 7, I think game week 9 in particular, when Chelsea run into a great run and Arsenal are like mid-great run as well, there's a fairly strong argument to look at a nomium draft without either of them, because I think their fixtures, Man City and Liverpool's, are middling-ish for a little while until about game week 13. So there's like a little run where you might be able to go without them. But again, by the time you get to game week 13, you're probably going to want, well, at least Haaland and probably Salah, if not just Isak. If by that point we know that Isak can cover Salah, whatever the hell that means, then maybe. But I wouldn't be brave enough to go without either of them today, considering the lack of other great captaincy options week on week.
Yeah, no, I'm with you on that one. And there can be great fun derived, and if you are kind of just thinking, I want to just make the most of the season and just enjoy the ride without either of them, then cool.
yeah,
go for it.
Play it your way, 100%.
And if you're not convinced, I think that either this week or game week 6 are the 2 weeks immediately that are worth looking at for playing a chip like this, like a team transformative chip. just because game week 5 is one of those, is a sort of an ugly runt middle child sort of thing, that probably you don't want to be playing a chip in. I have had a look at my game week 6 wildcard side in game week 5, playing it in that. But Arsenal playing City, Chelsea playing United, Bournemouth, you probably want a couple of players from Newcastle, who you probably want, the likes of Watkins, who are in many teams, Rodgers in many teams, and they've got a decent fixture away at Sunderland, although Sunderland are doing quite well, as we'll touch on later on. And it just doesn't feel like a good week to do it. So it's either this or 6. Those are the 2 weeks coming up that kind of have quite a friendly fixture roster. If not, then the next window is quite a long way in advance, isn't it? Was it game week 9, the next one that kind of looks okay?
I really like game week 7 for a wild card.
Personally. Oh yeah, 6 or 7, yeah.
Yeah. And then 13 is like the huge fixture swing for Liverpool, Man City, and Newcastle, all at once, where there could be a big change to people's teams around about then. Although they're all great teams anyway, you might just happen to have all of those players in there by then anyway. Like, how transformative is it going to be if you've got most of those positions covered? But yeah, I mean, I had penciled in game week 13 wildcard and free hit for game week 6 at the start of this season. Situations can change. I do quite like free hit this week. I also like wildcard 6 or 7. And yeah, bench boost triple captain can kind of just be thrown wherever it suits your team best, to be honest. But yeah, I think this week is quite a nice opportunity to do either of those buttons. But wildcard's more definitive, and I think you just need to hit that threshold of confidence, and I'm just not personally there yet. And like you said, it's every wildcard I've created that I like, I'm like, yeah, but that's at least 3 free transfers used in like the next 4 weeks to get to a team that I then love by game week 7. So it seems, for me personally, quite temporary, but yeah, everyone's different.
Yeah, for you. All right, well, with that, let's move on to one of the fixture for this week. Quite a lot to discuss on this one, but we'll keep it kind of fairly brief because we've covered an awful lot already. But in terms of players who are hitting the blipping on the formometer, Jack Grealish doing very well at Everton, seems very up for it versus old team as well. If that's something you really care about, 0.02 million price rise thus far. Up to equal 7th in terms of the non-pen XGI, which is very good. Leading the league for expected goals as well. Fixtures are a mixed bag up until the next international break. It's Villa home, Liverpool away, and West Ham Palace at home, which are arguably okay. Although Palace at home, as we know, is probably not an amazing fixture these days. Don't mind it. I think he's been benefiting from a glow of being a new signing in his new lease of life, and doubled the assists in his last 2 seasons at Man City and 11% of the minutes, Sam. So yeah, Jack Grealish playing with freedom under David Moyes versus the anti-football Guardiola. Yeah, I mean, what do you make of him?
I mean, I love him as a player, and like just as just great box office entertainment on and off the pitch as well. I do have a very like a soft spot for him, but yeah, I think anyone suggesting that he's going to continue at this rate is maybe a little bit overestimating his abilities. He's a great player. I love him, and I think playing with Everton in the side that won't be going up against low blocks all that often, that's where Jack Grealish will thrive. He'll play in those spaces, get beyond defenders, and be able to actually affect the game a little bit more. Whereas with City, he was used as almost like a pressure release valve at times, getting the ball up the pitch, making sure that they retain possession, and recycling as well. With Everton, he's got much more of a pivotal and important role, I suppose. Like everything has seemed like it centers around him. So I love him as a player, but I can't help but feel like he's a player that will over time help other Everton picks become better than him as FPL assets, like Ndiaye, for instance, who I think will have fantastic goal threat, assisted very neatly by Jack Grealish more often than not. So at 0.2 less than him, honestly, I still prefer Ndiaye personally. On penalties, better goal threat. That's not to say Grealish won't get goals, by the way, because at Aston Villa, he was known for the odd banger and he did score a few, but it does seem like he's more of a creative outlet than Ndiaye is. And out of the two, I think I'd still be personally going with Ndiaye. I think I think it's nearly 1 million transfers in for Grealish now.
Yep.
I mean, if you're free hitting in game week 5 for whatever reason, it's a good run, but he can't play against his parent club Man City in game week 8. So in the next 5 game weeks, he's missing one, playing Liverpool away, and then the other 3 admittedly are like fairly nice home fixtures. But a lot of people are still free hitting in either game week 4 or game week 6. So you don't need to buy him. If you wanted him for West Ham at home in game week 6, you could just have him on a free hit. So I like him as a player. I don't really fault the purchase, but I'm struggling to understand why nearly 1 million people have bought him in.
Well, there's a lot of action in midfield, Sam, which is probably the reason. So, almost 900,000 people have sold Palmer, getting close to 400,000 have sold Cunha, and incredibly, the players been brought in, the free midfielders been brought in the most are the free midfielders who are top in terms of scoring points this year. In Grealish number 1, Semenyo number 2, and Enzo Fernandez number 3. Shocker. It's literally just the symptom of people buying the highest scoring player when they've got someone to sell. And I would add a small point here that I used to laugh at this a little bit more than I do now. But as I now play other leagues in terms of fantasy, like Bundesliga and Eliteserien in Norway, I totally get why you might, because if you aren't as au fait with it, as knowledgeable about the league or the game as we are, looking at total points as the killer stat for a player's transfer in makes so much sense. I mean, we haven't got Semenyo on this week, but again, I can understand why people are kind of just like, yeah, you know what? All right. I need to get rid of Palmer. This Semenyo bloke, yeah, why not? Let's just get him. He seems to be doing all right, and we take it from there. And I think that's kind of literally as far as a lot of people go. And obviously, Jack Grealish has got that name recognition. All of these sort of basic factors probably do feed into it. But I completely agree with what you were saying in terms of the watch outs if you were to be buying Grealish. And I completely also agree that maybe looking at other options, not necessarily Ndiaye for me. I've always been a bit iffy on Ndiaye, but in this new Moy system, I'll never say never. No, maybe he has. Maybe in a new world, at the Dickinson Hill Stadium. I know it's still Dickinson, but I call it that. They will have checked. They will have turned the corner, and they're going to be an attacking force this year. They could well be. And we need to be able to change with the times. Elsewhere, I mentioned Enzo, João Pedro, still here. The top scoring attacking player or the top scoring forward, one of the two. I think he might be the top scoring forward. No, I think he maybe is a top scoring attacking player actually, by 1 point or something like that. One I was glad to be on from the start. Hasn't made my free hit team. Oh, actually, no, he has. That's a lie. So João Pedro's goals from headers, no Delap. So as you referenced a few weeks ago, Sam, without that threats his minutes. When his minutes go up, he suddenly becomes a ridiculously good asset. Chelsea's fixtures are mixed, but they're mixed / good for quite a long while. And by the way, one thing I've got to say is I really kind of applaud your decision to buy him last week, Sam. The transfer in for a player you've overlooked, who has kind of gone off, who's already at high ownership, is one which, in my experience, is actually the hardest to do. Because you feel like, oh shit, this guy's already gone off. I've missed the boat. So I think just doing that, especially at this early juncture, is just such a clever move, really. So yeah, one of those players who I don't think either of us are going to have any issues. I know he's risen by 0.2, but he's scored 26 points, and he is second for non-Penetri this year. Definitely worth a look.
Yeah. I mean, for me, from the second Palmer got injured, he became a better pick because his minutes went up. And I also thought he'd have penalties. That didn't seem to be the case with Enzo taking it, although there might have been a little bit of gifting of the penalty there. So it looks like maybe he would have been second in line if he hadn't have just given it to Enzo. I think there was a little bit of crowd trouble at the start of the game. Anyway, we're not the pod for that. But but yeah, so I bought him knowing that, or feeling like he was a better pick than game week 1, when I thought his minutes would be roughly 70 a week. I thought it'd be more like 85, 90 a week with Palmer out, and then Delap got injured, which also helped me feel more comfortable in my decision that I'd already previously made to have him, because I was a little bit worried that by game week 4, game week 5, I've then got a player that's gone back down in the expected minutes. But now with Delap out for a little while, I feel much more bullish on him long term. So yeah, I'm just glad to be on him now. Happy to own and happy to continue. I think the fixtures are decent enough. He is a form pick undoubtedly, but he's got all of the other elements you'd want in a player to buy. And at this point in the season, I'd ignore the ownership. Don't feel like you've missed the boat on him at all. Just get the player that you think is going to get the most points. And if you feel like he's still going to continue, then just get on him and enjoy the points. And I think it will. I don't think he's going to dip down anytime soon.
Yeah, he is he just was on my free hit, and I just don't really see the point of trying to be too clever there. We'll discuss that in a little bit. Speaking of free hit, Munoz and other Palace is certainly worth kind of maybe a form, maybe a fixture thing as well. Next to Sunderland and West Ham, I was debating which one this goes into, but after the last game against Villa, I kind of put them into the form category. Solid defence, I think they've kind of overtaken Forest in many people's minds now, or they should have at least, in terms of being kind of that kind of decently. Not as decent as last year when Milenkovic was 4.5 and so on and so forth, but a decently priced defence with good FDR and a sort of player, Munoz, the tackle king, in terms of the DEFCONs that you can just play in basically any game. And Liverpool in game week 6 coming up, Everton 7 and a visit to Arsenal in 9 as well. But I think longer term, getting one of their defenders makes buttload of sense. Very solid defensive unit, albeit Warson out may affect them negatively. And one of those teams really that you could kind of make the argument if you're on wildcard this week to go to. Richards is 4.5, gets DEFCONs, Gahey at 4.6 apparently can't stop scoring. And it just feels like it's a good one for both free hit and wildcarders, Sam, really. And one of those players, Munoz, who's very kind of strongly in automatic pick in my free hit, and almost definitely will also be in my wild card in game week 6.
Yeah, I mean, I cannot fault Munoz as a pick in any regard, whether you're wildcarding, free hitting, transferring in. Like, he just seems like the perfect all-rounder right now. I think he's rising in price tonight. So if you're on the exact money for a Murillo to Munoz and you need to make the move, then maybe you can look at doing that now. But I think with Palace as well, you mentioned the double up, and it's worth noting, like, a lot of people will be scared of doubling up on a team like Palace because they're an upper middle of the defenses in the Premier League. They're decent. They'll keep a fair few, maybe 10 to 12, maybe 15 if we're really lucky, clean sheets this season. But a lot of people will be scared of doubling up. But I think when you look at each individual Palace asset on their own merits, they each come with their own unique set of benefits. Like Munoz, the attacking threat is through the roof for a player like him. I mean, he was effectively playing striker in game week 3 at certain points. We know how good he can be at the back post as well. But then Lacroix is getting DEFCONs like they're going out of fashion. And you've then got 4.5 and 4.6 million options in Richards and Gahey, which, again, just your perfect fourth defender. Also pick up DEFCONs, also with a little bit of attacking threat. Lacroix, by the way, also has great set-piece threat. We saw that last season. I think he had an XG over the season of something like 4.5, 4.6, and only scored, I think, 1 goal in the league. So unlucky not to get quite a few more attacking returns. They're each on their own merits very good picks at their price points. So no qualms whatsoever about doubling up. And on a free hit, even if you think Sunderland have a decent chance of scoring, even if they did, that they've got enough routes there to actually make them decent enough picks even without the clean sheet. So yeah, I just think they're fantastic assets all round right now, especially Munoz at the price if you can afford him.
Yeah, no, the remontada from last year when we were just like, defenders, screw them. We'll take a bunch of 4.0s at the back if we could. To this year is quite seismic and something that we really need to bear in mind. And I couldn't agree more with all of those points. In terms of the fixtures, there's a real sort of strikers and focus thing. So Watkins, people are kind of losing hope. Isaac's been brought in a lot. João Pedro, who we've spoken about, has been brought in a lot. Wood's also being sold quite a lot. And Gyökeres, a lot of the analytics crowd bought him last week. The algos go wild for him as a starting striker for a league title chasing type with penalties, and those kind of 2 or 3 things are just a catnip to an algo, aren't they, really? I think he's one for game week 6, maybe game week 7 onwards. So with Nottingham Forest, Man City and Newcastle the next 3. In the short term, I'm not too sure whether I'd be selling Watkins for him, but I can kind of understand if you kind of feel like you have to go there. But people kind of taking him -4 for him last week. Okay, maybe some outcome didn't score. If he had scored against Liverpool, then maybe this would be a completely different conversation. But I think my initial thought probably wouldn't have changed. I'd be thinking, well, maybe let's just wait a minute and not overvalue penalties too much. This is why we end up buying players like Tielemans, or maybe buying players like Lucas Paqueta. Like a few people seem to be very, very interested in this week. I mean, I do like Gyökeres as a pick. Game week 6, 7 onwards. Not the most refined player in the world, most technical player in the world, it's probably fair to say. But one of his late bloomers, like I said on the preseason pod, that I'm still going to be, almost definitely including in my game week 6 wild card, depending on Havertz's fitness, actually, it should be said.
It must be said, I love him for this week against Nottingham Forest. I think that's a great fixture for him at home under the new management, where there might be a few like shifting strategies for Forest, a few question marks, maybe players not completely locked in anymore. I really like him for this week, but then game week 5 and 6, I equally really don't. So I probably, if I was on a free hit, he would be very close, if not in for me. If I was wildcarding, I probably wouldn't just yet. Although it does save a transfer down the line if you're really bullish on him by game week 7. I can see why you would include him. And yeah, I don't hate it necessarily. Whereas if I was looking at transfers, there's just no way I'd be going there this week, which is kind of three completely different answers depending which strategy you're on, which almost sounds nonsensical, but in my own head that makes sense. Would you agree with that generally, or am I chatting complete rubbish?
No, I see what you mean. It's one of those that if you buy him now, you kind of save yourself a transfer going forwards. So kind of get it.
Okay, but if you're on a wild card, you're not using a transfer to get him at all. So you're basically net zero on transfers. If you use a transfer now, it's probably away from like Watkins, right? But the next 3 or 4 fixtures are fine for Watkins.
Yeah.
So like you're either using a transfer now or you're using a transfer in game week 7 or 8 to get to Gyökeres. Either way, you're using a transfer if you're not on a wild card. So I'd probably just hold on to Watkins for the fixtures for the next few. Whereas if I'm on a wild card, it does save me a transfer and I've got that decision. So I think I'd then look at Gyökeres more closely.
It's difficult, isn't it? Because if you're on a wild card now, you're already baking in Haaland in for Salah out, almost definitely. So in that case, you're baking in free transfers. So yeah, I know. Yeah, so Gyökeres now on wildcard makes sense. But if you're in Watkins now, I wouldn't be selling him for. Yeah, okay, with you.
Exactly. Yeah. You got it.
Sorry, that took me a moment to pass. Yeah, we got you. Watkins does actually appear on this. Maybe worth bringing him in as well.
Yes.
8.9, and it's just the 6 points. 19th for non-penalty GI thus far this season. Everton, Sunderland, Fulham. Basically, the fixtures remain more than good until the next international break. Burnley in 7 as well. I don't think I'll make my wild card, Sam. I'm fully anticipating the burn whenever I sell the guy. It's one of those I can kind of feel people are losing faith a little bit, but maybe it's just because of what happened in the past, the immediate past, that I kind of have got that sort of. I have more anxiety about selling this guy than anyone else, I think, in the Premier League.
Yeah, I mean, I guess it's one of those where you just try to ask yourself, like, what are we actually expecting from Villa this season, and from Watkins, I suppose, as an extension from that? Are we truly expecting them just to never score a goal this year? Because if we are, fine, sell him. That makes complete sense. But realistically, I think it's much more likely that a manager of the quality of Emery, with the team that they've got, and yes, okay, they've not necessarily strengthened as much as maybe some people would have hoped, but they've still got quality individuals in there. They've got a good team. They should start picking up points and goals fairly soon. I'd be surprised if they don't at all. At 8.9 million, you do need him to be returning more often than not. So he wouldn't make it in on a wild card for me. But transfers are precious. And with the fixtures coming, I still feel like there's a decent opportunity for him to get 2 or 3 goals in the next 3 or 4 game weeks. And that means he's not worth selling for me, really. So yeah, for me, if I'm not wildcarding this week, he's staying. If I'm not free hitting, he'll be in my 11 this week. And if I was wildcarding, he'd be gone fairly soon. But because he's still in, and I expect him to get returns, that's part of the reason why I'm not thinking of wildcarding yet.
Yeah, and this is also kind of lent itself to the free hit for me, because I was just like, well, you know, Everton away, that's not the best fixture in the world, especially if you're a bit of a stuttering team. Who knows? I mean, basically is the death knell for Villa's bad streak, and they end up kind of winning 3-0, don't they? But I was thinking, well, okay, I can kind of free hit him out, have him for game week 5 against Sunderland, and then game week 6 I can kind of sell him and hope that Fulham show up, as I was saying to Dan in the chat. Yeah, one of those who's sadly one of a player that I was hoping would just kind of be a bit of a set and forget, but has now, because of his sort of the first 3 weeks, just made me think, oh well, he's under constant monitoring, and as it stands, yeah, he's just not a consideration for me on the wild card when it comes up. Final one this week, Alexander Isak, maybe a slight impact of the fact people are selling Wood and Watkins, I mentioned, but over 500,000 buys in for Isak. But I don't know, Sam. I don't know. I don't know why people are going there right now. Maybe that's just me being a pessimist, but I don't really see him starting against Burnley. Maybe in the Champions League in between, maybe in 5 versus Everton, and certainly in 6 versus Crystal Palace. He's going to be a starter at some point, that's for sure. I mean, I know I've cast aspersions on kind of people saying, oh, they spent all that money on that player, and that not really meaning very much these days, but for a record transfer fee, you got to be thinking that. Yeah, exactly. And as I said earlier on, he's going to be. I'm sure he'll be a paradigm shifter at some point over the course of the year. So yeah, I can kind of get it why people are kind of thinking about it, but I can't imagine people walking into it with an expectation he's going to be starting against Burnley this week. Because Ekatike's done so well. What does it say to Ekatike if suddenly he's kicked into the long grass and Isak started? I mean, poof.
Yeah, it'd be harsh, wouldn't it? I don't see how Isak starts this game week. Otherwise, they would have played him more in the international break when they needed him with Sweden. So I think it's unlikely he starts. Obviously, the temptation is there because he's a high upside player, and you just know what's going to happen. He will be benched against Burnley, but 500,000 transfers in, he's going to come off the bench for 10, maybe 20, 30 if they're lucky, and he's going to bag a brace, and everyone's going to be like, "Ha, told you so." And it's just the way FPL goes sometimes. It's how it's written. But all the logical, or I suppose all the logic in the world would suggest that he shouldn't start. Yeah. He'll get very reduced minutes against Burnley and build him into the starting 11. Ekatike's been great. Gakpo's been great. So maybe don't mess with something that's working too much and integrate him fairly. I was about to say slowly. It won't be slow. It will just be over a 2 or 3 game week period. But even when he is integrated, I will stress at 10.4 million, he doesn't have penalties, or very unlikely to have penalties unless Salah misses like the next 4 in a row or something. And do we genuinely think he's getting 90 every week? Because Ekatike's been fantastic, as I said. Gakpo's not going to just drop out, and Ekatike's not just going to share minutes with Gakpo. Isak's injury record is not perfect, and they'll know that. And then you've got Wirtz, who can play on the left side. Szoboszlai's been playing right back. Frimpong's back, Bradley's back. So Szoboszlai will be competing with Wirtz, and Wirtz might therefore then be competing with Gakpo, and there are knock-on effects to everything. I wonder what Isak's long-term expected minutes are going to be fighting across multiple formats. So at 10.4 million, if he's not on penalties and he's only getting 70 a match, that would worry me slightly for a player that expensive. But if he's getting 85, 90 a week, then at 10.4, it's probably looking pretty decent. So yeah, I'm not as on board with it as some are just yet. I just want to see how he fits in exactly. It will be a starter, no question. But is he going to be a 90-minute man? I think that's up for debate.
I want to wait and see as well. No, that's reality. That's why I thought I'm not going to wildcard this week and have the opportunity to think about maybe bringing him in 6. Or maybe it'll take a little while to settle down, because it will be a while because of the reasons you just laid out until the dust settles. And that is key, really, especially when you're spending that much on the player. Right,
Yep.
on to this week's 1 week punts, the update. So last week I went with Bumo, who got 10
Oh
points.
yeah, nice.
And so 18 points for me. And sadly, you went with Woods, who blanked. So 18-9 is the score at the moment. This week's picks for me this time is Gakpo. I'm going to use that up. Been full of praise for Gakpo this week. So I'll use him up on a 1 week punt. I think he'll start and do well against Burnley, and Liverpool relying on his guard and finding ways into central areas against that 5-man defence. So I'll go with him. It was very close with him and Nekatike, actually. I just kind of thought I'd use Gakpo one up now because I think there's less question marks about Gakpo. Just because I don't know, the devil in me does think that there could be a way that Slot just throws in Isaac and just goes, you know where, Katike, I'm the football manager, screw you. And I think
possible. Yeah.
I've just got I've got a lot of faith in Gakpo continuing for Liverpool. I don't know why on my left wing slot, but I think he definitely has made it his own, especially with Diaz now departed, and obviously Jota sadly no longer with us.
Yeah, absolutely. I think Gakpo's a fantastic shout this week. Yeah, I probably would have gone very similar to you if you hadn't gone first on the slide. So yeah, I'm a bit jealous of that one. Although I can technically pick it as well, so I did make my own choice. I've gone with Madueke, which is a bit rogue. I'm going to have to start picking the more front of house options at some point, but I'm still going for the differentials right now, just for a bit of fun, really, because it's only a game at the end of the day. So Madueke, I think against the new look potentially Forest, and maybe getting in behind a very freshly formed high line if Ange digs his claws in straight away and is like, right, no, we're playing this way. Madueke, fresh from his England exploits where he looked fantastic, by the way. I think with Saka still out, he's got that opportunity to get 80, 90 minutes and have a good day at the office. So yeah, I'm going with Madueke against Forest.
Yep, don't hate Madueke either. Cool. All right. Captaincy this week. I think it is fairly cut and dried, to be honest. On the ones who are featured for us on YouTube, Mr. Salah away at Burnley. So their XGC is the worst. Salah's XG, non-pen XGI, is not the best, but their XGC is the worst. So yeah, fair enough. Erling Haaland, who I actually do own on free hit, so maybe he could be worth talking about. He is top for non-pen XGI, unsurprisingly. And Man United's XGC is all right, kind of 7th best. And Sunderland, who play Crystal Palace, maybe looking at Mateta for that one. Mateta's doing all right. If you take away the penalty, it's not that great, actually. But Sunderland's XGC is actually pretty good. So they're 17th overall for XGC thus far. You mentioned Gyökeres as well, Sam, as a potential option for those who are on free hit, maybe as kind of a bit of a rogue one. I know that FPL General was looking at him as captaincy this week as well, because he's not without Salah and Haaland. For me, I think it's kind of one of those that you kind of just don't overthink it. Shove it on Egyptian King, even on free hit. I know people are kind of thinking, oh yeah, have fun, go elsewhere, but I can't see myself going elsewhere.
Fun is FPL points for me. With these options, I think Haaland and Salah are both very viable captains, but most people don't have both. There are a few out there that do. If you do have both, I would prefer Salah marginally, but not by a ton. So I understand it if you look away from him and go with Haaland. If you only have Salah, it's Salah by a mile. If you only have Haaland, it's Haaland by a mile. And if you have neither, then Mateta and Gyökeres for me are pretty much even Stevens. I'd probably just about go with Gyökeres over Mateta, actually. I think the fact that Palace have lost a few of their creative sparks and Sunderland have looked like a decent defense so far, it'd be enough for me to include him in a free hit or potentially a wild card or even as a transfer. I still think he's a good option, but Gyökeres, if you've got him against Forest this week, I've just got a feeling about it. I think he's going to have a good day at the office with that one. So I'd probably just about go Gyökeres in third place, but Mateta's not far off at all.
Yeah, no, I agree. All right, okay, let's do it then. Look at our teams for the week ahead. So I'm on free hit. I've been on free hit since Saturday. I'm kind of locked in, actually, in many positions, because I'm now up a lot in terms of money spent, and kind of helps as well, because it meant kind of the hellish tinkering is kind of locked off for me. I can't really do very much. I can mess around with a few positions, which I'll mention in a minute, but I don't have capacity to move in lots of players around because of the fact that I've got money accrued in lots of the players, so there's nothing I can really do. It's a Salah and Haaland team, set up in a 4-4-2. It's Henderson in goal, good at the old pen saves. Dubravka is on the bench in goal. At the back, it's Munoz, who double Palace defence with Henderson. Livramento, with no Strand Larson, we don't think, for Wolves. I've got him in there. Wolves have the lowest XG and even non-pen XG by 0.1 over Leeds. So Jusha and Venture, I know that Metcha scored a penalty for them. But with Strand Larson, who looks to be out, I don't think they're going to pose too much threats to Newcastle. So I thought, I'll get one of them. I think Livramento probably kind of fits the bill. Virgil's in, no nonsense. So Livramento, Virgil, Munoz, and then I've got Mosquera as well. Like I feel like he's like a good free hit pick at 5.4. I'm at 0.0, as I mentioned, a cheap Arsenal defender who should play with the injury to Saliba. The reason I'm kind of quite confident in him is because he was, some people may be thinking, oh, is he going to start? Well, he was brought on against Liverpool, of all teams, for Saliba, who went off after 5 minutes. So I think he's almost definitely there as the backup for Saliba. And I think we'll win that 1-0. So I'm kind of quite happy with that one. I think that the price, I think that's quite a good kind of coverage. At the back of the bench is Mukiele at the moment. I don't even know, like some 4.0, I don't care really. Second bench. 4-man mids. So Salah stays, he's the captain. Joined in the double with Gakpo to get me a rather beige Liverpool trio of Virgil, Gakpo, and Salah. But I think that's probably the best one this week. I don't mind TK as well, but that 1 million price difference means you have to dilute shit elsewhere, which I'm not a big fan of. Grealish is in for me, Sam, versus old club. I think I'm keen to have him this week. I think that's kind of just one of those kind of punts I'll take for this week only, given how Aston Villa have been, given how he started for Everton, and I wouldn't be considering him otherwise, let's be fair. And then I've got Tavernier, who's a compromise pick over Semenyo to basically fit in Haaland. I actually quite like Tavernier. I've always thought he's got a decent ceiling if you catch him at the right time. I know Kluivert's apparently on his way back, but I'm happy enough to roll the dice on Tav starting and getting his minutes. And up front, Haaland is joined by a remaining João Pedro. And on the bench aside from Mukiele, it's a Josh King sub 1. And then Gu, I think, is there because I need a 0.1 for Livramento. That is my team. And I've got a few sort of questions kind of that still hang around, but I think one that I've kind of I'm pretty much over is João Pedro versus Mateta. So we mentioned Mateta a minute ago. But the injuries for Palace, you mentioned, Sam, do put me off Mateta versus João Pedro. I mean, on the plus side, if you do think that Mateta is better than João Pedro on the free hit, João Pedro is playing not a newly promoted team this week, is not on penalties, rather than Mateta is. And Mateta doesn't have a midweek game again in the Champions League, so he probably will play 90 minutes. But I still think João Pedro is worth picking. I don't have a Chelsea defender. I've got Mosquera in as a free hit pick that no one will go over otherwise. Solves the problem for me at 5.4. I think I do genuinely think we'll win that one 1-0. And also there's a small miss as well, which is Fulham anywhere. But I feel like I prefer the Palace double defence and Henderson over Leno and goal and so on and so forth, and the other defenders over the options they've got there. And I'm not touching any of their 4 players, frankly. I'm kind of in this. I feel like I'm kind of pretty much locked into this just because of how the prices have kind of gone. I just quite like it. I know it's not the most exciting free hit in the world, but equally compared to my old team, rather than comparing to other extraneous factors like the players I could have. Now, one player I really love to have is Cucurella, actually, but I can't quite fit him in. I just kind of feel like it kind of nicely sort of balances out a bit of fun versus a bit of solidity. So, that's my free hit. And as I said to you earlier, Sam, I'm expecting you to just laugh at me and think this is awful. But I'm really interested to hear your thoughts.
No laughing whatsoever. Don't be ridiculous. I as I said to you via message earlier, free hit teams generally across the board look really powerful to me this week because there are a lot of good fixtures to target, and you've captured pretty much all of those fixtures to target in this. So looking at your back four and your goalkeeper, you've covered off all of the top 4 defenses for clean sheet odds this week. All of which are above 40%, which is a really good threshold to be targeting. And obviously Munoz, you've got upside. You've got Virgil with Defcon upside. Livramento's look fantastic. The one question mark I would have would be Mosquera, but you're the Arsenal expert, not me. The only thing that I would be questioning there would be, how sure are you that Timber, Calafiori, Ben White couldn't come in and play centre-back, considering I know Mosquera came off the bench directly for Saliba, but Timber was already on the pitch now. So they're not going to like just throw him in at centre-back and move on. So they've had 2 weeks and to think about things. Are they thinking, oh, possibly Mosquera's quite new, Timber's been around for a while, he knows the systems, we'll get Lewis Skelly at left back, for instance, and shift things around. Calafiori could come in or whatever. Maybe there's a chance there. That would be my only question mark. But again, 90 to 95% sure that he starts as well. Midfield, I don't really hate anything here. I would go with the same 3 Liverpool. I'd go with João Pedro as well. I've got a free hit draft that we can move over to in a second. If I was to free hit, it doesn't have Haaland in it. The reason for that is I think I'm just more bullish on Gyökeres this week, and Mateta as well, I suppose, than you are. And I don't think they're that far. I think they're behind, but I don't think they're that far off of Haaland for what I'd expect out of them this week. I don't think their expected points are a mile off. And if this was a wildcard side, I'd almost be more tempted to go with both Salah and Haaland, because over the next 4 weeks, you captain each of them a couple of times, but you can only captain one of them this week. So is Haaland that high on the upside and that far ahead of Gyökeres Mateta that it's worth the extra 6 million over Gyökeres? 5 million over Gyökeres, and the amount that you can then do to upgrade, like to Tavernier, to Tavernier, whatever, to Semenyo, Grealish could go up. Like there's a few, and obviously Mosquera can then be Gabriel, blah blah blah, etc. etc. So that would be the main difference between mine and yours. If we move over quickly, I think you're 1 over. There we go. So mine for listeners at the moment is same clean sheets covered off, the 5 overall, including goalkeeper. So Pope in goal rather than your Livramento. For Newcastle, I've got Gabriel instead of your Mosquera. I've got Munoz and Lacroix instead of your Munoz and Henderson. And I've got Virgil van Dijk as well. In midfield, I've got Salah and Gakpo. So same Liverpool triple up, same captain. Semenyo instead of your Bournemouth asset. And up front, I've gone with 3. So I've gone with Pedro, same as you, and then I've gone Mateta and Gyökeres. Because again, I'm pretty high on Gyökeres for this week. I've got Reinders on the bench, who I actually have a sneaky feeling does really well against Man United. And then after that, who cares? It's Dubravka, King, Rodon on the bench. So that if I was free hitting right now, it'd be something like around about this. It does say 0 in the bank. If I needed it, I could downgrade Rodon to a 3.9. I think there's is it Vukovic at Spurs if I needed that extra 0.1.
Which one's Zabe as well?
Okay. And then also Reinders could go down considerably if I needed the money, because realistically all of these players I expect to start or at least get minutes. I am a bit tempted by going like Barnes and Wirtz instead of Gakpo and Semenyo, but I'm just not confident enough that Howe hasn't stopped messing with his lineup on Barnes. I'm just a little bit scared off. If he played a 4-3-3 and Barnes had started against Leeds, Barnes would be in right now, no question about it. But because he didn't, I think Semenyo seems like a good cover off. Equally, that Semenyo spot, I have toyed around with Madueke because I've got a good feeling about Madueke this week, but I think Semenyo is probably the most sensible, like not guarantee, but like likelihood of a route to a high score there. So it would be, my free hit would be around about this. Do you want to talk about this side of the free hit versus yours for a little bit before we look at my team as it stands?
I mean, they're all players that I have considered who have all been in the mix, and exactly, they're all in the mix for obvious reason. Honestly, I think the only one that my regret is that I don't really have the space, because I'm pretty bullish on a Haaland Salah Haaland draft. I mean, that was always going to be in mind for me if I was free hitting this week. I don't really kind of, I kind of just think Haaland's in the mood right now.
Then
Honestly,
captain
I mean,
Haaland and go with him and save the
yeah,
money.
yeah, that was good. I was going to say that, like, I was going to Haaland captain's probably one of the key questions as well for me in mind for this situation, but I'm not going to overthink it too far. But I think I'd rather collect the point, even though the Haaland, yeah, okay, I'm not going to captain him. He's worth a lot of money, blah, blah, blah. But I think that there's more scope for him to give me more points that I can collect and put into my points pot than with Gyökeres. And I might be wrong. I think that's very much a gut call, as it always is in a 1 week shootout when it's a rental player that you're basically the variances prey, aren't you, for 1 week? But I just kind of feel like I kind of prefer Haaland. But yeah, going without it, this would be a very, very similar team to the one that I put together. In fact, pretty much identical. Having the same coverage and defense as you, effectively having the same coverage in midfield as you in terms of the attacking players, and also kind of keeping João Pedro around. It pretty much is just another iteration of mine if I decided to not go with Haaland. And it's one of those where I didn't want to open the door, Sam, honestly, because I think that can confuse you a little bit. And because I was so like close on affordability, literally I think on Sunday I bought it with 0.1 or something like that in the bank, and then it ticked over, and it was like, well, okay, here I am now. It's maybe some cost. Maybe I'm kind of just like, oh yeah, I'm just kind of attached to this. But yeah, I completely get what you're saying about Gyökeres. I just think that Haaland's can outscore him. But that's simply it. But yeah.
I think Haaland will outscore Gyökeres as well, by the way. I'm not no question, but over 100 games, Haaland outscores Gyökeres. No, I'm not worried about that. It's what that extra 5 million can do for me. And because I'm not captaining him, that 5 million can, I believe, at least outscore the difference between Haaland and Gyökeres in the other position. So it's a bit moneybally. Like, I'm creating it in the aggregate. I'm creating a Haaland in the aggregate somewhere, I hope. But like you say, it's 1 game week. It can completely flip. And if Haaland and Salah both score hat-tricks this week, then your draft absolutely tears everyone else to shreds. So yeah, it's 1 week. Like, go with your gut, 100%.
Yeah, and there's a few sort of things I've had to do. So putting into Vernier over Semenyo, for example, that I really like on your Barnes point. I really like Elanga this week, but I can't do it with Haaland in the draft because I'd end up with King as the first sub and then like a 3.9 and like all sorts of kind of shenanigans would then have to go on. My sole Crystal Palace defender would be a Richards or something along those lines. And it all starts to get very convoluted and a bit overthought. Trying to remember the lessons of a month ago when I was saying, yeah, okay, I went into the season with 1 draft too many. So I don't want to be kind of overthinking this as far as I possibly can.
Free hit should be gut and vibes as well. There's a serious element of that. Yeah.
I think the thing is that obviously when it's over international break, it gives something to do. So the next international break is going to be really boring for me. But equally, I think that it kind of gives you, it gives you more time to think about these things if you are that way inclined. But I spent, as I said, a lot of time hacking away at my game week 6 wildcards. So I kind of looked at my free hit, did it. Most of it pays itself. I mean, Henderson and Livramento came in today because I realised that Gu was 0.1 less than Krupi or whatever it was, so I could afford Livramento. But that's kind of it. But the big question for you, Sam, is should you free hit? Because I mean, the team for the week ahead actually is fairly decent.
Yeah, on paper, right now, anyway. This is my key question. I keep coming back and forth on this. I've been messaging you all week saying I'm excited for tonight's pod to see what you think you would do with this. Okay, so for the listeners, I've got Sanchez in goal, Tarko, Anderson for Fulham, Tarko at home to Villa, Anderson at home to Leeds, Porro away at West Ham, in midfield, Salah, Burnley, Sarr against Sunderland, Ndai, Villa, and Fernandez away at City, João Pedro, Watkins, and Strand Larsen up top. So I've got 2 flags in my 11, Saar and Strand Larsen. And if everyone in this squad was fit, I wouldn't even really be that worried about a free hit. But because I've only got 1 free transfer to use, so originally I wanted 3 free transfers for this week, at least 2, so I can get an extra Liverpool and I can get another Palace as well on top of Saar, who I've already got. As it stands, it looks like I've got 1 Liverpool player and no fit Palace players to play, which were the 2 fixtures I wanted to target. I was also going without any Arsenal players, any Newcastle players as well on for game week 4 naturally, which I wasn't particularly happy with. But in the run of a long season, I was willing to sacrifice those for this week, considering the fixtures around weren't ideal and I was going to probably have cover of Palace and Liverpool. I don't have that much Palace or Liverpool cover, and nor can I get that much, considering I've not got the transfers to do so, and Saar's injured as well, it looks like. So I can use 1 free transfer. I think, well, I could take a hit, potentially, which I haven't completely ruled out, but is unlikely. That would be Murillo on my bench to Lacroix, and then Saar would go up to Semenyo, just about. So I could do that. I could just do 1 free transfer, which would be Murillo to a Palace option. So Lacroix, Munoz potentially. Little bit tempted with Lacroix because then it enables me to get to Semenyo next game week if Saar is still a doubt. Or I could just deal with Saar now, forgo any extra Palace whatsoever. I'm already forgoing any extra Liverpool, and Saar would move to, it would have to be someone cheaper than Semenyo. It would have to be probably Paqueta, maybe. Not overly excited by that. I quite like him, but not like jumping with joy for that. And Barnes, potentially Reinders, maybe. None of which like are players I'm over the moon about this week, but it could give me a decent enough side to get through this week without needing a free hit. However, if both Saar and Strand Larsen are out, then players coming off my bench look like Nottingham Forest away at Arsenal, Anderson and Murillo at the moment. It does make me feel like there's an opportunity here, especially considering I expect Strand Larsen, if he's not fit this week, to be back for game week 5. And I actually really like his fixtures from game week 5 onwards. And Saar, who knows how long he'll be out for. But next week, I'm actually like, I've got double Everton away at Liverpool, but I don't hate a bench boost, as crazy as that sounds. And I'm only one player away from a decent looking bench boost if I get rid of Saar if he's injured. If he's not injured, then I can get rid of an Everton player and make my bench boost look a bit stronger if I use it. So I quite like a free hit. And as I've shown you my free hit already, it's covering off all of the best defenses for this week, all plus 40% on the clean sheet odds. I've got none of those covered at the moment, although none of them look objectively terrible this week. I've got extra Liverpool attack. I've got Arsenal attack. I've got Palace attack, which it looks like I've not got either this week, and Semenyo. It just looks way more powerful. And the way I'm looking at my future game weeks, if I free hitted this week, I could find my route to Haaland fairly easily in game week 6, and then either wildcard in game week 6 or game week 7. And I can't really see any other place where I'd need to use a free hit, really. So I'm wondering if there's just an opportunity kind of smacking me in the face this week with a ton of upside, and like running all of these solves on Solio and stuff. Like
I've seen it.
I don't swear by it or anything, but like looking at it, that all of the different routes suggest that the maximum upside I'd expect on a free hit versus my team on a regular basis would be 5 to 6 points in any other game week. This week, it's like a 10-point upside, potentially. So if they're both out, I think free hit. If one of them's out, then I'm like 75-25. Tom, what would you do?
So, I mean, looking at the team that you had, defense good. No,
good
we know you've kind of set up very nicely with defense wise. Strand Larsen and Saar out. I mean, either of those sales are the ones you mentioned. They feel like trades rather than investments. Sort of player who's good for this week, but then after that, you're kind of in the kind of iffyville, and it's not entirely sure about the longevity of that. Other players, Bruno versus City, maybe we can make a case that that's not particularly optimal for this week. And as you said, if you don't make a transfer this week, Anderson and Murillo come in, and you're maybe in the scenario where you're thinking, maybe this is hit worthy. So your free hit versus your normal team, there's clear upside versus your side. And this is why kind of last week when I was looking at it, like that, I didn't really kind of believe that my kind of main team versus the free hit team were going to elicit any. I could see a world where both of them would score kind of equitably. And I may be incredibly wrong, and trust me, I've been incredibly wrong probably the last 9 years. But I think there's clear upside in your free hit side versus this side, and you've got the same problems as I had, really. So Saar likely to be out as far as we know. Only one Liverpool.
No Arsenal, no Newcastle.
No Arsenal, no Newcastle. And then the players who, if you don't do anything, come in are playing Arsenal. It kind of feels like, and you answered the question about what you're going to do between 5 and a potential wild card and 6 or 7, what your Haaland plan was. It feels like the upside is kind of there. It kind of by process elimination, it feels like the free hit is well worth playing this week. And well worth playing comes with obviously clear caveats surrounding, we can't be certain, there's no guarantees, etc., and so on and so on. But
this is the thing that's bugging me in the back of my head, where I think any time you free hit in the first half of the season, it's very unlikely that you're guaranteed to do better than your original side, unless you've just been decimated by injuries, because we're not dealing with doubles and blanks where you can get extra fixtures out of it. You're playing an 11 versus what would have been an 11 previously, and even with terrible fixtures, any 11 upsets happen, right? So there's at least a risk. It's not non-existent that my original side, because they're good players, like even against good teams, these guys can score, and Dye can definitely score against Villa. Watkins can score against Everton. Bruno could score. Like, all of these players could do something. They're just all each one of these players, almost to a man, barring Salah and Pedro, actually, none of them would be in my free hit side, and all of them are just that one tier down, maybe 2 tiers down in certain scenarios, where then they wouldn't be quite there on a free hit, but they're not like objectively bad picks this week. Like, if someone had any of these players, bar like the 2 injured players this week, in their side, I'd be like, yeah, I mean, you can carry them. They're absolutely fine. They're not perfect, but they're fine for this week. But I think I've just got a whole squad of, they're okay, rather than any players that are optimal. I'm using inverted commas there very strongly. And that, I think the combination of having like maybe 1, possibly 2 players in here that are anywhere near a free hit side right now is tempting me. I
think just take if you think about next week, right, then you end up with Anderson and Murillo with a decent fixture, and they can come in for Saar and Strand Larsen then, and something that looks a lot better.
I'd be stunned if Strand Larsen wasn't back in Gameweek 5, by the way.
I think the rental possibility of getting quality out of kind of just renting an 11 this week, minus probably Salah, João Pedro, and co, is definitely, the expected points just feel a lot higher, really. And I think that's the algos as well as the instincts. So I do feel like it's a good week to free hit, mate. It's just, I don't really see. I know what you mean about the guarantee, and it's not guaranteed, because obviously in a blank week, it's probably guaranteed that if you can play an 11 versus playing 6, you're probably okay. But in your case,
you're not going to get that there. Yeah,
you're looking at Anderson and Murillo. What's your actual expectation? Yeah, okay. I mean, maybe Forest could show up against Arsenal and win 2-0, but is that really gonna? If you think about a Football Manager, think about save scumming and Football Manager. How many times are you gonna have to reload the game if you're Ange Postecoglou to win 2-0 against Arsenal? You're gonna have to reload that game 1,000,000 times to basically get a decent outcome against that. And any week, that's the way. I mean, that's the game we play, and that's real life. But I think this is a good enough opportunity to go for it and hopefully to the marks. As you said, what 6 points per million? I mean, if you play your cards right on a free hit, which given your free hit is actually looking very good, you could find yourself in the top. You could find yourself in the top million, which sounds ridiculous, but right now that would be a very good place to be. And I know, what does Ross always say? You can be more annoyed if you do play the free hit and it goes wrong, or you don't play the free hit and it was a missed opportunity. Which one is more impactful for you?
Yeah.
For me, I think I'd be looking at your team and going, yeah, this is a good time to free hit. And then next week I'd come back to actually a really good game week 5 team. Whereas for me, I come back with a pile of crap anyway. So
yeah. I think that's a good point. And thinking about the ranges of like the margins of error on both of these different sides, I think the free hit I'd expect somewhere, like if I'm unlucky, around 50, if I'm lucky, 70 to 75. Whereas my original side, if I'm lucky, maybe pushes 55, 60. And if I'm unlucky, it could car crash at like 35, 40. So like, I think there is like a margin of error in the middle where if the free hit was very unlucky and my original side was quite lucky, they could touch fairly close to each other. And maybe my original side, there are universes in which it beats it, but that could happen every single week for the first half of the season. And I do just wonder, especially if Saar and Strand Larsen are confirmed out, I think that probably tips me over the edge enough that I could make peace with, fine, my original side could score 55, 60 points. It's possible, but most universes, I would be more confident that this side on screen, the free hit right now, gets or has the potential at least to get upwards of 70, 75.
Yeah. We all love
a lot of things would have to go wrong for it not to do all right.
Yeah, we all love guarantees for managers, and I think with the free hit, especially because of the weight of the chip, right? We all kind of hope that on a blank game week, if we play on a blank game week, we're all hoping that we know we can get a green arrow. It's just how far. I think it's just kind of disentangling yourself from that instinct that you're going to get a green arrow. But I think there's enough probability this week, given the way the fixtures have fallen, given the team that you've got, to think, yeah, okay, let's go for it. And if you're wildcarding as well, as earlier on, that's fine too, because there is a way that you can chart the course further on. But yeah, interested to see what you do, and we'll find out next week.
Fantastic. Yeah, that was a really enjoyable pod. Thank you so much for your help on that last bit as well, Tom. I will let you know how I get on with my final decisions. And yeah, thank you all so much, as always, for tuning in and listening along. We have been Who Got the Assist. You can find us on Blue Sky at Who Got the Assist, all spelt out one word, and FPL Pricey for me. On X, it's WGTA_FPL. FPL Pricey for me on there as well. And on YouTube, it's WGTA_FPL. And you can find me on YouTube as well at FPL Pricey. And I'll be doing my my live stream on Friday night this week. So if you want to tune in and have a bit of fun laughing at me stressing over whether I'm free hitting or not, that is the place to do so. If you did enjoy the pod, please do one or all of the following if possible, including following us on the social channels I just mentioned, giving the pod a 5-star rating on Spotify, iTunes, wherever you're listening. And of course, if you could click like, hit subscribe on YouTube if you're watching along on here, that would be greatly appreciated as well. Thank you all so much.
Yep, thanks so much. Thanks, Sam, and thanks for listening or watching. We hope we assist you come back to FPL if you, like me, switched off during the national break. And we'll be back at the usual time next week, so we'll see you next Tuesday.
Oh, it's a goal. Who got the assist? Who got the assist?